apologize to anyone who feels sorely amakom. I see we've already outgrown our current venue, and Baruch Hashem, arrangements have been made so that the next Vaad will be in a little bit more ravchus. We have the source of being in the Sterling Forest, Ashkenaz Shul, the next Vaad, and we'll be davening Marav at 10:15. Bezos Hashem, 10:30 the Vaad will start. It's in the Ashkenaz Shul downstairs in Sterling Forest. I also want to thank Reb Yitzchak Gross has done a terrific job being the coordinator. If anyone gets a Talalas out of this Vaad, we owe a great debt of gratitude to him. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, a lot of back and forth people don't aware of, but I just want to mention publicly our appreciation for your serving as an excellent coordinator. I also want to thank everybody who submitted questions and topics to Reb Yitzchak. I said at the beginning that I wanted this to be your Vaad and driven by your agenda, and I'm very gratified to see that people did respond and gave Yitzchak suggestions, one of which is the topic that we're going to be speaking about tonight, which is the question was how to develop a warm Kesher with a teenage son. And that's the topic for this evening, how to develop a warm relationship with a teenage boy. Now, I think for this topic, which certainly we could spend the whole year on and not exhaust it, but just to touch on 2 points, we should follow the prescription, really, of David HaMelech. It says in Tillim, that we say every Shabbos and Yontif, Sur Me'rav Asei Tov, that in any endeavor in life, you have to try to avoid that which interferes and may be destructive, and try to do that which is helpful and constructive. So that's the outline of what we're going to be talking about this evening. So the first aspect is the Sur Me'rav. What is it that we have to try to avoid that could interfere with developing a warm kesher with a teenage boy, whether it's a son or a Talmud? But especially we're talking about a teenage son. The Gemara in Gittin says, Amar Rav Chisda, Stavvav Amid Beis, Li'olam, always, no exception. La'olam means across the board, all the time. Al yatil adam ema yesera b'sof beso. A person should not instill excessive fear in his household. Sharei pilegish begiva hitil Allah aleha bala ema yesera. Because we see in the mice at the end of Sefer Shoftim, pilegish begiva, that the husband there did instill excessive fear in his house. The Hipila Kama Revivos Yisrael. And as a result of that, there were many tens of thousands of Yidden, Rahman al-Islam, that were killed in the battle. That was caused by that. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. And Rabbi Yehuda Amarav goes further and says, Kol hamatil ema yaser b'sof beiso. Whoever is nichshel and instills excessive fear in his household, sofu ba lidei shalosh averos. He's going to come to being nichshel, or causing someone to be nichshel, in 3 averas. What are the averas? Gilei arayas, shvichas damim, v'chol Shabbos. I don't know about you, but if I was going to make a list of the top 3 averas I would want to avoid in my life, I couldn't think of 3 others that would be more serious that I'd want to avoid. Chil Shabbos, Yitziter Chil Shabbos, Shvichas Damim and Gilei Arayas, and this is all Chazal are telling us could be an outgrowth of being Matal Emi Yasera. I want to be medayik here that Chazal are not saying that a father or a husband shouldn't have authority, exert authority in his household. Doesn't mean it cannot be any aim at all. But Chazal is saying Amy Yasera is what is dangerous. Now, the Gemara is talking about the Ma'aseh Pelegish Begiva. That's between a husband and wife. our subject tonight is between a father and a son, between a parent and a child. Nevertheless, if there's Amy Yasera B'Soch Beso, even between the husband and wife, trust me, it's going to affect the kids also. And it's not possible for a man to be matel Amy Yasera B'Soch Beso, and it's not going to touch his children also, and have serious, serious consequences, and be a tremendous maneya in the relationship that a father should have with his son. So, let me cite one illustration to give you an example of what I'm talking about. When I first began my private practice over 35 years ago, so one of the things that I did was to go around to Rabbanim in the neighborhood and inform them of my services. No one knew who I was and that I had a practice. And although I had been working in the clinic for a number of years, but no one knew that I was accepting private cases, so I met with a number of Rabbanim. And a number of the Rabbanim I met with said, why should I refer to you? You're just starting. I should refer to someone who's more experienced than you. So I was certainly, obviously, discouraged by that. Then I met one Rav, who was a menayel of one of the largest moistos achinuch in Brooklyn at the time. And he said to me, tell me, you give pills? I said, well, if you're asking if I prescribe medication, the answer is no, I don't prescribe medication. I'm a therapist, I talk to people. I said, no. I believe pills help, but talking doesn't really help. I left his office and I was encouraged. I told my wife I felt good after that. She said, you felt good? The guy says he doesn't believe in therapy. Why were you encouraged? I said, listen, if he believed in therapy, he's got a top drawer full of business cards of other therapists. He doesn't need me. This guy doesn't believe in therapy. He doesn't have any business cards in his top drawer. At least he has mine. Never know. He might call me one day. If he's going to call anyone, he's going to call me. Now, he was an intimidating type of personality. A very authoritarian type of person. I could see the way he was talking to the people in the office, his staff, and he was one of these guys who literally was talking on two phones at the same time, kept me waiting, called me in. He was a pretty gruff kind of a person, but I assume that's what would be necessary to run such a big masjid with so many hundreds of, maybe thousands of talmidim in masjid. Sure enough, a few months later, the Maal calls me. He wants me to see his son. Really? I was flattered that he thought highly enough of me. He's going to refer his son. I said, okay, I'll give him an appointment. He said, but there's one condition. I said, what's that? He says, my son's not going to come to your office. I said, so when do you want me to see him? So I want you to come to my home. Well, in those days I wasn't so busy, so I could make a home visit. It was in the neighborhood, it wasn't so far. I said, okay, I'll see him in the home. If that's what you want to do. But tell me, what do you want me to see your son about? Why do you want me to see him? He says, he's acting very, very strange. I don't know what's going on with him. There's something wrong, and I want you to speak to him, try to figure out what's the problem. I said, well, tell me, in what way is he acting strange? He said, lately he's been cutting out of yeshiva in the afternoon seder, and he goes home. Now, he said, it's not the fact that my son is missing learning in the afternoon. Of course, I don't want him to be outside of the Beis Medrash. That's where he belongs. The Mesivta boy belongs in Beis Medrash in the afternoon. But what bothers me is, what was he thinking? I'm not going to know he wasn't in Beis Medrash. I'm the Menal. And I'm not going to know he came home? Where am I going to find him? People are not going to keep that a secret. So he's sneaking out of Beis Medrash and hiding in a home? I'm not going to find that out? Of course I'm going to find that. What was he thinking? I can't imagine what's going on in his mind that he would do such a thing. And he didn't do it once, he did it 3 times. Okay. So I came to the Menal's house. Son didn't even want to come down to the living room to me. I had to go up to his bedroom. He was very down, looked very depressed, withdrawn. I could hardly talk to him. He was very broken. But during the course of the session, trying to pull out of him what's going on, what is he feeling, it was clear to me that he was feeling very, very intimidated by his father. And I could certainly understand that. I felt intimidated by him also, and I was a lot older. When I went to his office, I felt also intimidated at the time. I knew what he was talking about. I said, listen, we're not going to solve this just today in one session. Would you be willing to come to my office and we'll talk about this further? He agreed. So I gave him an appointment. The son said, okay, he met me, spoke with me, he'll come to my office. The next day, the father called me up. He says, well, what happened? I said, I spoke with your son. Yeah, so what happened? I said, I gave him another appointment. He said, but I want to know what you found out about him. I said, well, I'm speaking with him. I don't want to speak to you privately. He said, okay, I don't care if you speak to me in front of my son. That's fine with me. My son has an appointment tomorrow. He said, I'll come. You'll see us both together. I said, well, I'm going to be there. I'm coming with my son. I want to know what's going on. Well, certainly wasn't somebody that I could argue with, and I didn't feel that I could oppose him. He was a very strong-minded personality. I said, okay, I'll see you both together. So the two of them were sitting down in my office, and the father looks at me in a sort of glaring way, right at the beginning of the session. He said, okay. He says, I want to know, what's the story with my son? What's going on with him? Now, I might have handled it differently today, but in those days, I really felt very put on the spot, and I felt I had to answer him. I also felt I don't have too many chances with this man, because he seemed to be a very impatient fellow, and he's not going to put up with the long process of, we'll talk about it, we'll see, I'll come back, we'll think about it. He wanted to know topless on the table. So I thought to myself, well, I have one shot, one bullet in the gun, so to speak. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to let him have it. In a gentle way, of course. So I said to him, you want to know what's wrong with your son? You want to know what's bothering him? He said, yeah, tell me. Whatever it is, I can hear it. Tell me. If it's something that's about me, whatever it is, tell me. I paused. I took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and I said, your son is afraid of you. What? He's afraid of me? He was incredulous. He thought, I'm off the charts to come up with such an assessment like that. This is ridiculous. He was flabbergasted. He turns to his son, and as he composed himself, he says, is that true? Is what Wikler said right? The son couldn't look at his father. He was shaking. His lips were trembling. He looked down at the floor. I thought he was going to pass out. I had such rachmanis on this boy. His shoulders began to heave. He couldn't look at his father. He just looked up at him briefly, looked down again. He couldn't even utter a word. He just nodded affirmatively. And then he broke into uncontrollable sobs. The father was shocked out of his mind. He didn't believe that such a thing was possible, that he had made such a horrible blunder as a parent, that his son was so terrified of him that it caused him to act so strangely. The father started to cry. The two of them embraced right in front of me in my office, crying on each other's shoulders like Yosef and Binyamin on this week's Parsha, just crying on each other's shoulders. I must admit, seeing that scene in my office, I also started to cry. It was very, very moving. I was very touched by it. Nothing more needed to be said. The father got up, the session wasn't over. He said, let me pay you for the session today. Let me pay you for the session you saw my son. I don't know how to thank you. He said, things are going to change in my house. And thank you for setting me straight. He felt a little embarrassed, and he wanted to end the session early, and I couldn't call him back, and he left with his son. I didn't see him after that. But since he lived in the neighborhood, I did see him sometimes on the street with his son. And although I never met with them again, I never spoke with them again, and I think he was too embarrassed to even acknowledge me on the street, and I didn't acknowledge him. I respected his privacy. But when I saw him walking on the street with his son, I saw that there was a Kesher there. There was a warmth that had been established. The father learned from his mistake, learned his lesson, and corrected his ways. So, the Sur Meirah, Rabbosai, if you want to establish a warm Kesher with a teenage son, it's very important to follow the words of Chazal, who said, La'olam al yatil adam emi yaseir b'soch beso. This father clearly was matil an emi yaseir b'soch beso, and it had some very serious consequences. Now, what's the Asay Tov? Well, the Asay Tov, I want to bring a pasuk from this last week's parsha. Yosef Atzadik tells his brothers that he's going to go speak to Paro. He's going to tell them that his brothers came. And he's going to say that they're shepherds. And then, when V'haya ki yikra lachem Paro, and Paro will call you, V'amar ma'ama seichem, and he'll tell you, he'll ask you, what kind of work do you do? What's your profession? That you'll tell him you're shepherds. V'kach hava, that's what Paro asked. He says, ma'ama seichem. So I didn't see anything before Shem asked, but I was wondering, Yosef Atzadik was not a Navi. How did he know that Paro was going to ask, Ma'ama Seichem? And we see that he was correct. That's exactly what Paro asked, Ma'ama Seichem. I didn't see anything before Shem talk about it, but I think there's a pasha to teretz. The question of what kind of work do you do is a question that ad hayom hazeh we ask. When you meet someone socially, at a simcha, or you sit next to them on the bus, and you start talking, what's one of the first things you ask him? What do you do for a living? What kind of work do you do? And I think it's pretty universal. And I think Yosef Atzadik correctly assumed that Paro would ask this question. Even though Yosef had already told them what they do for a living. He still asked the question, Ma'ama Seichem. I think the reason is rather pashut, that when we begin a conversation with somebody, and we want to develop a warm kesher, even with a stranger, in a social setting, we want to talk to them, we want to get them to talk to us about something that they're comfortable speaking about, that they enjoy speaking about. And most people are familiar and comfortable speaking about the kind of work they do. Now, maybe they hate their work, and they just like to complain about it, but they enjoy complaining about their work or talking about it. It's a comfortable, pleasant subject. So if you want to develop a kesher with somebody, it's important to try to talk to them about something that they're interested in, that they enjoy and they want to talk about. Now, when it comes to small children, that's really a no-brainer. It's very easy. The simplest thing to bring up with a small child, if you want to make a good connection with a niece, a nephew, the neighbor's kids, just ask a little kid, show me your toys. They love it. They love to show an adult their toys and describe their toys and show it to them, because toys are important to children. It's an important part of their life. They enjoy playing with the toys, and they love telling adults and showing adults their toys. That's for a small child. That's easy. That's if you ask a child, show me your toys, or tell me how this works, or what's the doll's name, anything like that, you have a bond with that child that's stronger than crazy glue. And it's quicker than crazy glue. Because you have the child connecting with you about something that's of interest to them, and that good feeling they have about the toy or about the doll gets transferred to you, and you have an instant bond. Now with a teenage boy, it's not always so simple. Because their interests are not so apparent, and they're not so available, and they're not so in touch with it, and they may not be so expressive about it. So if you want to develop a warm kesher with your teenage son, it may not be so apparent what his interests are, what he likes to talk about. If you talk to him about what you want to talk about, you're going to be interested, and he's not. And he's going to be tuning out. If you want to have a kesher with your teenage son, you don't talk to him about the things that are important to you. If you want to develop a warm relationship with your teenage son, and it's very, very important for a teenager to have a warm relationship with his father, then you want to talk to him about things that are important to him, that he likes talking about. Now, to illustrate this, I wanted to cite an example from about 20, 25 years ago. It's an extreme example, but it illustrates the point I'm trying to make. There was a couple of parents who came to see me. They were concerned about their 14-year-old boy, his 10th grade Mesivta boy. He was doing okay, passing his beginners, but he didn't seem to be Me'urav ben Abrius. He had no friends. He wasn't close with anybody. He didn't have any shackles with any of the boys in the class. And he hardly opened up in the shiur. The Rebbe couldn't get him to respond. He never asked a question. And if the Rebbe called on him, he gave one-word answers. During recess, he wasn't involved with anybody. No one came to the home. He didn't go to anybody else's home. He was very, very quiet and into himself. Parents didn't know, was it a shyness? Was it a lack of self-esteem? A lack of social skills? They didn't know what it was, but they were concerned. Now, he was always this way. As a little boy, he was this way. But they figured he'll grow out of it. He became bar mitzvah. He's going to have a bar mitzvah. For sure, after his bar mitzvah, he'll put on a hat, he'll put on tefillin. He'll get with the program. At 14 in 10th grade, it wasn't going, and the parents started getting concerned, what's going to be? How's this guy going to ever be able to, if he can't talk to his classmates, how's he going to ever talk to a girl on a date? How's he going to get married? What's going to be with him? They were concerned. So they asked me if I'd be willing to work with him. I said, of course. Make an appointment. Is he willing to speak to me? They said, he's very cooperative. He's not a rebellious kid. He's not someone who's oppositional in any way. And if they tell him they want him to speak to him, he'll come. Okay. So the first session, I saw exactly what the parents were talking about. I asked him questions, trying to pull out of him his interests, to get him to talk, just about anything. And every question was answered with a one-word answer. The silences in the first session were so big it could drive a truck through them. And it was very uncomfortable, I'm sure, for him. By the next session, I realized we're not going to get very far this way. I'm going to run out of questions. And we're going to sit there in silence. And his anxiety is going to go up. And how long is he going to put up with this? And I have to try to at least develop a kesher with him. Otherwise, we're not going to get to first base. So I have a therapeutic game, which I use in such emergencies, which is just a stack of cards with questions on it, and take turns, and you pick a card, it asks a question, you answer the question. It's sort of like an icebreaker or a conversation starter. So we started playing this game, and he draws a card with the question on it, what's your favorite car? Simple question, simple answer. And he answers, one word again, a Hummer. Now, when it was my turn to ask a question, because sometimes there's a card that says you can ask a question of the other person, I was kind of clueless. I didn't know what a Hummer was. So I said, what's a Hummer? He said, it's a kind of a car. Well, what kind of car is it? He started describing it to me. As he started describing it to me, I saw he got a little animated. I started asking more questions about the Hummer. We spent the rest of the session, he's describing the Hummer. Now, for those of you who are as ill-informed as I was, a Hummer is a make of a car that's built something like a tank. And I don't know why anyone would buy a Hummer, or want to drive a Hummer, but I suppose it must be marketed to people who either have low self-esteem or feel very insecure. But they like to drive on the road feeling they're in some kind of an impenetrable vehicle that could withstand any kind of terrorist attack. And I could understand why a boy like this would admire that kind of car, because he was so insecure himself. It made sense to me that he would be interested in a Hummer. So at the end of the session, he said to me, almost in passing, I could barely hear it as he walked out the door, would I be interested in seeing a picture of a Hummer? I said, of course. Does he have a picture at home? I said. He said he did. I said, well, please bring it in. I'd love to. He came in the next week with a thick, large, glossy catalog, kind of magazine, like twice the size of a BP or the Voice of Lakewood. And it was all just marketing pictures of a Hummer. each page was a different angle, a different view of a different part of the car, colorful in different settings, in country road, different city streets, but it was all just pictures of Hummers, and it was meant as a marketing tool, advertising. So we spent the whole session just looking through this magazine. I was fascinated by it. I said, where did you get this? He said, oh, you can call up an 800 number and the company will send it to you for free. I said, really? I said, do you have others? He said, oh, sure. I said, would you bring another one next week? He said, sure. Well, each week, he brought another magazine of a different car, and we spent the entire session just looking through the thing together, turning the pages, commenting on it. He started commenting on it. The conversation was all about the cars, and we went through. We did Cadillac, we did Lincoln, we did Buick. I remember, I learned more cars than I knew even existed. And he had these, each one was fancier, glossier, stadier than the next. And that's what we did for about 4 or 5 months. We just looked at cars for this session each week. Then he went off to camp. After camp, his parents called to make another appointment for their son. What's the next? What? I said, I haven't seen you for 4 or 5 months. I really need to see you to find out what's going on. They said, okay. They came in. I said, can you tell me what's doing with your son? I haven't seen you in 4 or 5 months. They said, well, we don't know what you've been doing with our son. He doesn't tell us anything about the sessions with you, and we don't ask him. We don't pry. And you don't have to tell us either. But we just want to tell you that the change in our son has been dramatic. He was at camp this summer, the first year. He's been in camp before. First summer he had friends. Even at the end of the year, he started developing friends. The Rebbe called us to ask us what we would do. Of course, we didn't tell him he was in therapy. But the Rebbe said, I want you to know your son came out of his shell. He's talking in class. He's asking kashas. He's answering more than one word answers. I don't know what is happening. It's not my shiur, I can tell you that. But he seems to be more urban and abrius. I said, well, in that case, it doesn't sound like he needs more therapy. I'll see him once more to end with him. They were very profuse in their gratitude. They said, we don't know how to thank you enough. He's become a normal, he's a mensch. Came out of his shell. So I ended with the boy after the summer. He thanked me for the time we worked together. I could see that he was obviously on the road to normalcy, as we might put it. And I think back to this case, and I think to myself, in my own mind, this was my Hummer case, Hummer therapy. Now, what I wanted to bring out by talking about this particular case, although it is an extreme case, it illustrates the point that I was making. That if you can find that nakuda, and sometimes it's very difficult. With this boy, it was quite a struggle and a challenge to find that nakuda that interests him. But if you can find that point that interests him, and you can focus on that in your relationship, in your conversation, and talk to him about things that are interesting to him, then that's how you're going to be able to build a warm, close relationship with a teenage boy. Now, this also applies to teenage girls as well, but sometimes teenage boys are harder to develop a kesher with and more challenging, and that's why we focused on it tonight. So I just want to remind you that for those of you who came in late, that the next Vaad will be in 4 weeks in Me'ez Hashem, January 17th. We'll have a new venue at the Sterling Forest Ashkenaz Shul. We'll be davening Marav at 10:15, and the Vaad will begin immediately following Marav. And I want to thank the Rabbi Stein, I believe, for giving us permission for that. And again, I want to thank those of you who gave suggestions to Reb Yitzchak to please continue to do so, and from those I'll select for next time. And also, just want to mention as well that we're coming into the season of inclement weather. In case there's an emergency and I would not be able to come into Lakewood, I'll be in touch with Reb Yitzchak. You can be in touch with him. And if you want to just verify that the shiur is on or if it's off or something of that nature. And thank you again for coming.